there's a lot more energy inputs that have to happen as you start to go into your 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. So I know for myself, I need to make sure I double down on things that I didn't even think about before. I need to make sure I do the kind of exercise that keeps my muscle mass up, that it keeps my mitochondria functioning well. I need to eat foods that are upregulating all the pathways that I need to keep functioning well. So I think there's a lot of different aspects to how we live that really undermine our health. But once we focus on the right things, we can actually upgrade and upregulate our health and basically get an upgrade to our biological software at any age.
Morning, Mark. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
So Mark, as you know, I'm one of the co-founders of Lifeforce, and it's great to spend some time together this morning. For those that don't know, Mark, you're the head of strategy and innovation for the Cleveland Clinic Center for Functional Medicine. You're a 14 times New York Times bestseller in the space of functional and personalized medicine. You're also a member of the Lifeforce Scientific, Clinical and Advisory Board, which is fantastic. And we're really privileged to have you helping us build the company. So we've been looking forward to the chat and really looking forward to getting your perspective on what we're up to and what you're seeing in this space of functional medicine.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Great. So Mark, you're really at the cutting edge and one of the global influences in this space around how people can make better decisions, more personalized decisions about their health for a longer and higher quality life. What are you most excited about in the space of functional medicine at the moment? What are you seeing and what are you most excited about?
Well, honestly, the thing I'm most excited about is it actually, I think, has finally taken root in our culture and healthcare, and more people are aware of it. I mean, 10, 15 years ago, I used to give a talk, who knows what functional medicine is? Maybe one hand would go up, and now pretty much half the room or more hands go up. And it's being incorporated into places like Cleveland Clinic. It's now being talked about in Washington, D.C. I just came back from Washington last week discussing how do we integrate functional medicine and nutrition, clinical care. I literally was shocked to find out that the dean of this medical school in West Virginia has been certified in functional medicine, which just made me so happy. So I think now consumers are wanting more of it. I think doctors are understanding that the paradigm we have of disease-based care, not exactly always looking at how do we create health, but how do we treat disease, is flawed, and that we need to rethink our approach to disease by creating health and using that as a model for actually focusing on what we do every day in healthcare.
Awesome. So does it feel like we are at that tipping point where functional medicine is breaking out? Does this feel different to you at the moment to how it's felt in the past?
It really does. Like I was walking down the street in New York City and I saw this clinic and it had all kinds of different services and offerings, and it said functional medicine on the door. I'm like, wow, this is actually something that people are getting. It's not what happened for decades was integrative medicine was out there as the answer, but while it's helpful, it really doesn't provide a new paradigm for how we deal with chronic disease. It's really about using other modalities that have been around for a long time, like Ayurveda, Chinese medicine, homeopathy, acupuncture, chiropractic, osteopathy, all these wonderful modalities that I personally use, but they're not a different framework for how we address our chronic disease epidemic. And functional medicine provides an operating system for traditionally trained doctors. I'm not an acupuncturist, I'm not an Ayurvedic specialist, but I'm a science-based physician. I can use existing science. It's systems biology is teaching us to actually help create health in the body. And I also see, really amazing things at Harvard, for example. There's a couple of professors there that have written a book called Network Medicine, which essentially is functional medicine as the way we need to rethink our whole approach to diagnosis and disease. So I think it's just starting to really happen.
Right. Yeah. I mean, obviously at Lifeforce, one of our goals is to make functional medicine more accessible to people. And there are a lot of companies in this space who are trying to use technology and new ways of delivering care to break this out and accelerate that transition to functional medicine becoming mainstream. So when we reach out to you to start talking about you joining as a member of our clinical and scientific advisory board, what was it about our model? What was it about the company that was attractive?
I mean, the truth is I know Tony Robbins and Peter Diamandis pretty well. And I've talked to Peter a lot about this, and I know that they really get the value of this different paradigm shift in healthcare, and they really want to put some energy behind bringing this both into healthcare and also to consumer-facing solutions like Lifeforce to help people take advantage of the emerging science and make it practical. So that's what got me excited. And I love those guys. So I'm like, sure, I'll help.
Yeah, I mean, they've been fantastic influences for us in terms of how we think about building the model and how we make sure that we're delivering impact for people. So lucky to have them, lucky to have you as well. One of the periods of life that we've designed Lifeforce to really support people through is this 30s, 40s, 50s chapters where people start to feel some changes in their mental and physical performance, and they start to notice there's shifts that they want to address in order to keep living their lives in the ways that are important to them. So can you tell us a little bit more about that from a clinical perspective? What is actually happening in your body as you enter that sort of midlife period that people need to understand?
Well, I mean, basically, like all systems, we're subject to entropy. Entropy is the degradation or breakdown that happens as a course of the natural history of most of life, right? Whether it's plants or animals or humans, there's breakdown. But there's your house, right? And so we have to be more diligent about maintaining our physical health. So if you have a Toyota Camry that runs off the assembly line, you can probably drive that for 5 years and never do anything to it except put gas in it. If you have a 1938, Mercedes convertible, it's going to need a lot of TLC to keep it running, but it can keep running. And there are cars that are 100 years old that still run very well, but they have to be treated well and they have to be maintained well. And so there's a lot more energy inputs that have to happen as you start to go into your 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. So I know for myself, I need to make sure I double down on things that I didn't even think about before. I need to make sure I do the kind of exercise that keeps my muscle mass up, that it keeps my mitochondria functioning well. I need to eat foods that are upregulating all the pathways that I need to keep functioning well, whether it's my microbiome, my immune system, my mitochondria, my hormones. I need to take the right nutrients to optimize my nutrient levels, because as we get older, we need different kinds of nutrients. So I think there's a lot of different aspects to how we live that really undermine our health. But once we focus on the right things, we can actually upgrade and upregulate our health and basically get an upgrade to our biological software at any age.
And just to sort of keep pulling on that for a second, you are obviously known for really living the recommendations you make and embodying the things that you suggest to all the people who
try.
Yeah, all the people who follow you. And so I'd love to know, as you've moved through different decades, what do you think are the most impactful changes you've made in terms of things you've stopped, things you've added, things you've started doing differently that have made you perform better in the way that you want to?
Like I finished my residency in 1990. In 1992, the food pyramid came out, which said we should eat 6 to 11 servings of bread, rice, cereal, and pasta every day. So I kind of got caught up in that. And then I really found that it wasn't working for me or my patients over time, and began to shift my recommendations. So I've done a number of things. One, I've really shifted my diet to be much higher in fat, much lower in starch and sugar, much higher in phytochemicals and plant foods. So it's plant rich. 70% of my plate every night is vegetables or plant foods. And I made sure I have adequate protein, the right kinds of protein as we age. So looking at the data, and I've written about this in my new book, Young Forever, which is out February 2023, we have to maintain our muscle mass as we get older. So muscle mass is the currency of longevity and of staying functional, of being able to tie your shoes and get up and go to the bathroom by yourself and then end up in a nursing home. It's really, really important. And we lose muscle steadily through our 30s, 40s, and 50s unless we do something about it. Now, I have to be honest, I hated strength training. I mean, I would ride my bike for 100 miles before I would want to lift weights, and I did. And I did yoga, and I thought, oh, that's good. That's enough strength training. It's fine. But it really wasn't. And then I got to be 60, and I'm like, all right, I'm giving everybody this advice. I better take it myself. And it was transformational. So not only did I upgrade the quality of the protein I'm eating, shift my diet to be lower starch and sugar, more phytochemicals, really begin to sort of understand more about the microbiome and how to upgrade my microbiome. But I understood that building muscle was so key. So I started strength training using the TB12 Sports band program, which is amazing. And you're not going to end up winning Mr. Universe and from those bands, but you are going to get very strong, you're going to get very fit, and you're going to get a lot of muscle tone. And I'm way more fit and muscular at 62, almost 63 than I was at 40 or 30. And I look at pictures of myself, and I wasn't overweight, but I was under lean, right? My muscle mass was not where it should be. So I've really upgraded my workout routine, I've upgraded my diet, I've upgraded the quality of the ingredients that I'm putting in my body. I've optimized my nutrient and supplement intake and all that. And of course, I focused on quality sleep and stress reduction. I meditate usually once or twice a day. That really is so important, and just keeping the systems running. So I do focus on maintenance, but it doesn't take up all my day or all my life. I'm very active in work and busy. So you just have to build it into the structure of your day.
Yeah, so I was thinking about this theme around muscle mass and how important that is for long life and good life. It feels like that's something that really has been understood more and more in the last short number of years. But some people may be struggling to think about how to reconcile that with some other things that they've been told are very good for longevity, like yourself, cardiovascular.
You mean like you should be vegan to make sure you live a long time?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of signals, and they're not always easy to reconcile. What advice would you have for people around that?
Oh wow, I wrote a whole book about it. Young Forever, coming out February 23. But here's the take home. If you even look at the studies where you could argue that you need lower protein when you're younger, even those studies that vegans quote are clear in that if you don't have adequate protein, more protein when you get over 60, you're in trouble. That your mortality goes up, your diseases go up. So and the question is, what is the quality of the protein? What are the studies you're looking at? Most of the data comes from large observational studies, which are so confounded by other things. And even if you say, well, that meat seemed to be bad, well, what else were they eating with it? What kind of meat were they eating? Were they eating, wild elk, or were they having some feedlot animal that was fed all kinds of crap and Skittles and hormones and corn? What are the quality of the ingredients? So I just came back from Korea and Sardinia, where I was researching my book on the blue zones, and it was fascinating to see how, they eat a fair bit of animal food. They didn't eat that much meat because they couldn't afford it, but they had a lot of goat and sheep milk and cheese, and it was really a staple in their diet. And what was so fascinating was that they knew that if they took their animals to this kind of wild patch of grass here and this wild bush over here at this time of year, that the cheese tasted better. Mm-hmm. Well, what they were doing without even knowing it was they were actually introducing phytochemicals, because phytochemicals are the plant compounds that give flavor to food, into the animals. It was absorbed into their body and became part of the milk and the cheese. So, phytochemicals actually can be found in meat. If you, for example, eat a regeneratively raised grass-fed meat that's been eating not just one or two forms of grass, but can sample dozens or even up to 100 different plants, all of which have different medicinal properties, you're getting the benefit of that. The other problem is leucine. Now, you can get enough plant protein, but you have to eat a lot of quinoa or brown rice or beans to get the equivalent amount of protein and leucine that you need to get from a 4 or 6 ounce piece of chicken or fish or meat. And what happens is the usability of it is lower when it's from those plant sources. Now, you can jack it up with branched chain amino acid supplements. You can jack it up with extra leucine, and there are plant proteins that do that. But you have to be really careful, because you think about it, like if you have to eat some processed food, let's say a processed plant protein, to actually do well, that makes you wonder if is that the right diet. And if you have to take a pile of supplements to deal with all the nutritional deficiencies of iron and zinc and iodine and vitamin D and omega-3s, is that really the optimal diet for us? So I think, we should be eating our diet mostly plants. Like, we should be definitely having a plant-rich diet. That's not the same as a plant-based diet. So yes, your diet should be mostly based on plants, but not only based on plants, I don't think. And I think, if you look at studies, for example, where they did sort of more balanced research, and they were able to look, for example, at meat eaters who also shopped at health food stores compared to vegetarians who shopped at health food stores, meaning that their lifestyle habits were probably better. they probably exercise, they probably ate healthier food. Both groups, vegetarians and the meat eaters, had their risk of death reduced in half and their disease risk reduced in half. So I think we get a little confused. There's a little bit of a more nuanced version of this conversation, which we can get into if you want, about mTOR. mTOR basically is this pathway that we have in our bodies that if it's on all the time, we don't do well. We age faster, we accumulate all kinds of excess molecules, cancer risk, heart disease risk. And so this pathway called mTOR, we have to silence it. And that's why, or quiet it down. That's why we talk about fasting, a caloric restriction, intermittent fasting. And that's why people say you don't eat protein, because protein simulates mTOR, but so does sugar, by the way, and carbohydrate. So if you're eating beans, it also simulates mTOR. But the protein does simulate mTOR, but it's like it's like a buildup and a breakdown. You need protein at the right times to build tissue and to rebuild organs and systems and cells, but you also want to take a break. So everybody should basically be having a 12-hour fast from dinner to breakfast. So right, that means if you finish dinner at 8 at night, you shouldn't eat till 8 in the morning. That's called breakfast. Okay. But most people snack all the time and they eat late and they get up and eat early. That's not good. And ideally, you could stretch it out to 12 hours, from 12 hours to 14 or 16 hours. And those do have benefits in actually keeping mTOR quiet for a period of time, giving your body a sense of starvation, which activates these healing pathways. You can also do a once a week fast for 24 hours, 36 hours. You can do longer fast. There's a lot of ways to hack this. There's also plant compounds that mimic mTOR. Rapamycin is a drug that's being used to study longevity that actually affects mTOR. So, I think it's a very nuanced conversation, but the bottom line is we do need the right kind of protein to build muscle as you get older. And there's no doubt about the science that animal protein works better than plant protein. You can't argue the data. Now you can find people who will, and there are people who still believe the earth is flat, and there's still people who believe that, maybe the evolution is not something that happened or is true, but that doesn't mean it's not true.
Yeah. And to your point around how nuanced and also complex it is to really understand what's the best health optimization approach for each individual, you're a practicing family physician still. You're seeing a lot of people through the Cleveland Clinic Center for Functional Medicine. In your experience, what do you think are the major blockers that get in the way of regular people who are interested in optimizing their health, interested in a long life, a good life, but what tends to get in the way? Is it access to expertise? Is it cost? What are the most fundamental things that you think are blockers for people to really take advantage of a lot of these things?
Well, a lot of the things that really work don't cost anything, right? And I think, good food doesn't have to be expensive. You don't need a lot of equipment to exercise. I bought a few bands. It didn't cost me much money, or you can use your own body weight. There's a lot of great workouts that use your own body weight. Sleep, all you need is a bed. Meditation, you just need the floor. I mean, I would just literally sit on the floor in my office at Cleveland Clinic and meditate sometimes. So the basic practices of taking care of yourself really don't have to cost that much. Even, basically the two most important nutrients, omega-3s and vitamin D, they're very cheap, and you can get, for pennies a day, the dose you need to actually keep your body healthy. So I think for the basics, it's really quite inexpensive. And the barrier often is education, what to do, how to do it, when to do it. I think people are confused, and there's so much diverse nutritional information out there. There's so many diet wars. So it's really important for people to actually kind of get some education, which is why I've written so many books, like Food, What the Heck Should I Eat? And The Pegan Diet, which is basically 21 principles for eating in a nutritionally confusing world, basically.
Yeah, I think that sense of overwhelm, and there now being so much information, it's almost been a pendulum swing where 10, 20 years ago, it was hard to find good information, and now there is so much information available, and it's not always easy to make sense of what's truth and what's not so truth. Also applies definitely within the supplement space. There's just a massive amount of supplements on the market. You can see that when you walk through any grocery store. I'd love your point of view on evaluating supplements, and when you're looking at supplements, nutraceuticals, how do you sort quality from not quality? What are the things that are most important that people should be using as their framework to evaluate those things for themselves?
Yeah, so I'm very, I've written a lot about this. And I think, the sad thing is we do need supplements. Why? Because one, we're exposed to a lot more stresses than we ever were when our bodies need them. Two, we don't walk around naked half the day like we did. We need to get vitamin D. Three, we don't eat all the wild foods we did in wild animals and fish that give us omega-3 fats. Four, soils are really harmed and damaged by the ways we farm and deplete a lot of the organic matter and the microbes, basically killing the microbiome of the soil, which is required to extract nutrients. So your broccoli today might be 50% less than it was 50 years ago. Plus, we eat a lot of nutrient depleted foods. And so there's really, I think, a need for basic supplementation. And so the question then is what to take and how do you evaluate whether it's good or not? So there's a whole group of companies that really have high integrity that work with physicians and healthcare providers and do a lot of due diligence around the ingredients in terms of the raw materials, the sourcing of them, testing for purity and potency before they make it in supplement, testing it after the production to make sure it's shelf-stable, make sure it has exactly what it says on the label in the pill. Because you could say 5,000 units of vitamin D on the label, but it could have 50 and you wouldn't know. And there's no law or regulation that requires it to have 5,000, unlike drugs. That's part of the problem with our regulatory environment. So you want to make sure the purity and potency is there. There's pre and post testing from a third party, not an internal company that says, oh, well, we tested our own product and it's good. No. A third party chemical testing company. You want to make sure there's no fillers, there's no excipients, there's no coloring. I mean, think about Centrum. It's like a blue pill. Why do you want to take blue dye for the rest of your life? I don't understand that. And you have to make sure it's the right form of the nutrient, because a lot of times nutrients might not be available. If you buy magnesium in this health grocery store, it might be magnesium oxide, which is cheap, but it also doesn't get absorbed very well. So I do go through a really rigorous process when looking at products to see what I'm going to recommend to my patients, because I use these as medicines and therapeutically. So I don't really want to give something that's going to waste their money, but something that's going to be actually useful and helpful.
Right. And based on that experience of working with people, I'm assuming using their blood work as well to inform what's needed.
For sure.
What are the what are the top 2 or 3 supplements that you see most commonly having a big impact on people's lives?
I mean, it's really easy. I think, everybody should be on a multivitamin, vitamin D, and fish oil. And if I had to add a fourth, it would be magnesium. That's going to cover the basis for 99% of the things you're not getting. And a good multivitamin, it has the right nutrients, the right availability, all the vitamins, all the minerals. So that's just good insurance, and there's no downside to it.
Got it. Great. And on that topic of blood work, so at Lifeforce, we sort of use a blood panel of 40 different biomarkers is really the foundation of how we think about creating programs for people. What would you say to sort of friends or family members around the importance of regular blood work? This is something that not many people currently engage in, but more are taking it up. What's your point of view on how to use blood work to optimize health?
Well, I definitely think that, we really have such a beautiful array of tests that were not available into our grandparents, but that now we basically understand how to assess our biology in a more sophisticated way to look at where things are out of balance. So I use testing to look at hormones, to look at your lipids, blood sugar, insulin, to look at your nutrient levels and really see what's going on under the hood. And then I customize and personalize the treatments based on that. So I think it's really useful to do testing, and it's really helpful. And so I think it's an important part of building an overall care plan for yourself.
And one of the things that we work with people on is to understand the difference between a blood test for health optimization versus a blood test that you may get through your primary care provider as part of your annual physical. How do you think about that distinction?
I mean, look, not all doctors are going to do the full panel of tests that you want to do to look for health optimization. And often they won't do tests they're not familiar with or don't understand. And often they'll use reference ranges that really don't apply. For example, vitamin D, you see some labs with a reference range of 20 to like 75. Well, that's ridiculous. Your level should be over 45, and the data is really clear on this. So, what's the optimal level? It's not necessarily what the reference range is, because that's based on an average of a population, which is what we call normal, but it's not optimal. In other words, if you're a Martian and you land in America today, over 75% of Americans are overweight. That's normal. If you do a bell curve, it's normal to be overweight. So I'm in the 2% on the end of the bell curve of being, a body mass index of like 21 or 22, as opposed to 25 or 30 or 50 or whatever people are in America. So that doesn't mean it's optimal. It just means it's normal is based on a statistical number that is the average in a population. So whether you're, 20 and healthy or 80 or 90, the reference ranges are all the same. And that just doesn't make any sense. So we really look at how to be optimized. Like homocysteine is a great example. That's a measure of your B vitamin status. And there's really clear data. If your level's over 14, you have twice the risk of dementia. But most reference ranges are like up to 15. I'm like, no, it should be 6 to 8.
And do you often find yourself working on hormone optimization?
Absolutely.
With folks at your clinic?
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the things that goes wrong as we age, is our hormones start to go wacky for a lot of reasons. Insulin is the number one. That's driven by our sugar and starch in the diet. 2 is cortisol, stress hormones, because we're often overstressed and under relaxed in this society. We don't take time to do the things that calm our nervous system. So getting the right kinds of reset on that. But cortisol is harder to test. We can do saliva cortisol testing. Also, thyroid testing, super important. 1 in 5 women, 1 in 10 men have low thyroid function. Half of them are not diagnosed, and probably another 3/4 are probably not treated properly or optimized. And then lastly, obviously, the sex hormones, male hormones, testosterone, and female hormones, estrogen, progesterone, and some of the other hormonal indicators like DHEA. So these are the things that we look at, and then we try to find out why there's a problem. Is it lifestyle? I mean, lifting weights will raise testosterone. If you eat a lot of sugar, it'll raise your estrogen even as a man. So there's a lot of ways to modify this and optimize these different kind of hormones. And we really use a very focused approach in functional medicine to personalize the approach.
And that sort of awareness around the role of hormones in overall health and performance is growing. But I think it's another place where people struggle to identify what's a high quality solution or a high quality provider versus something that's not. What's your advice for people if people are interested in learning about their hormones, think they may benefit from some sort of hormone optimization approach? What is doing that the right way? What are the things they should be looking for when they're evaluating different solutions to work with?
I mean, I've written extensively about this. I actually have a guide called How to Work with Your Doctor to Get What You Need, which I think is free online. And I said, here's the tests you should ask for. Here's what they mean. Here's the right ones to do. They often will not do the right test. They'll often check your TSH, for example, for your thyroid, but not the T3 or 4, not your thyroid antibodies. So really, it's important to get the right test. Second is you want to use, if you're going to use hormones, most of the time you don't need to if you're actually doing all the lifestyle factors of regulating balanced hormones, whether it's insulin or cortisol, or whether it's thyroid hormones or sex, or even sex hormones. So it's really important to make sure you're doing the things that you need to do from a lifestyle dietary point of view. Then I look at how do we optimize hormones, sometimes using bioidentical hormones. And so my basic rule is lowest dose possible, the shortest time possible, ideally delivered topically, and not all can be like thyroid, and actually using bioidentical forms. So you don't want to use a weird form of a hormone like Premarin, for example, which is pregnant mare's urine. That's how they came up with the word Premarin, pregnant mare's urine. And we know that's a very, very different kind of estrogen than humans make. It's very inflammatory, and it causes liver problems, triglycerides elevation. They can cause more cancer risk and more toxic metabolites of estrogen. So you want to make sure you're on the right forms, which are bioidentical, means the kind your body makes, because everything in your body works like a lock and a key, and you want to make sure you have the right hormone for the right receptor to do the right thing.
So Mike, whenever we've spoken and you've shared a little bit about what you're up to at any point in time, it's amazing the things that you're involved in, and that it's all fit into one life. And so we'd love to learn a little bit about your practices around high performance and sort of how you're able to juggle everything you juggle. So when we look at your morning routine, what are the 1 or 2 things that are part of that morning routine that you think are most important for making sure that you win the day, that you have peak performance as you need it during your life?
I mean, I make sure I get good sleep. That's the first thing. And so I have like a dark shade in my room. I have eye shades, I have earplugs. I make sure the temperature is cool. I have an 8 sleep mat. So I make sure I get good sleep at night. I'm a little bit of the princess and the bee at this point in my life. I didn't used to be, but I kind of am now. Second is when I wake up, I usually meditate for 20 minutes. Often will journal, which I find really helpful just to kind of get down my feelings, thoughts, my reflections on my life, what's happening, helps me sort of, and then when sort of, it's like self-therapy in a way. I don't know how to explain it. And then I'll usually do a workout with my TB12 bands, which is 30 minutes. And I'll do a little stretching afterwards, foam rolling. And then I do what I call my healthy aging shake, which is a shake that's designed to optimize the right amount of quality of protein to build muscle. It's got mitochondrial boosters in it, gut boosters, adrenal boosters, and it's sort of like a cocktail of all the sort of my favorite things to kind of keep my system going, anti-inflammatory compounds. And it's really a wonderful way for me to just get the day going. And I feel amazing when I do that and can conquer the world.
And on the flip side, what's the thing you should be doing more of that you struggle with? What's the practice that's hardest for you to stick with?
I think it's a challenge. Is really my lifestyle. I mean, I travel a lot, so ideally being in the same bed and having a sort of a stable routine is one of the most important things for your health, and that's where I tend to fail the most. But I try even wherever I am. I was in Washington D.C. this week, and I made sure I meditated. I made sure I worked out with my bands in my hotel room. I make sure I got good food at the restaurant. So I still try. It's just not as good. It's just not. So I think there's a quote from E.B. White or something that says, "Is every day I wake up determined to change the world and have a hell of a good time, and it makes planning the day very difficult." So
yeah, I think we've been there for sure. So Mark, you mentioned a few times in this conversation the concept of personalization, which we're hearing a lot about in this space, and it's sort of almost becoming one of these words that everyone's using. It's not always clear what exactly that means. So in your mind, when we think about personalized medicine, what is that? Why is it so important? How does it impact people the most in your experience?
Yeah, I think the truth is that we've had a one-size-fits-all kind of healthcare, and that it has to end. The science doesn't support it. We're all genetically different. We're all unique. We all have different needs. And so from my perspective as a functional medicine doctor, that's a big part of what functional medicine is. It's personalized medicine. And it does so through detailed history, through the right diagnostic tests, and through customizing an approach for each person. So no two people walk in my office with the same disease and I treat them the same way. It's really based on what their etiology or cause is. And that's really an important piece that we tend to forget in medicine, that just because someone has diabetes or someone has autoimmune disease like rheumatoid arthritis, they're not necessarily the same diseases in each patient. So it's really, functional medicine is a roadmap for helping you to map out what are the individual imbalances for that patient and how to fix it.
Got it. Great. And Mark, just sort of zooming out a second to think about this concept of health span and lifespan, and your learning sort of over the years in what's most important here. If you were to speaking to someone who's say just about to celebrate their 40th birthday, for example, what's the one most powerful piece of advice you'd give someone who's just about to turn 40 who does care a lot about health span and lifespan?
I mean, listen, I think you could do 1,000 things for your life. Probably the most important thing you do is to cut out or dramatically reduce sugar and starch, and that includes alcohol. So those drive every single one of the hallmarks of aging. They drive all the pathways that cause disease. It just should not be part of our diet. It never was part of our diet. It shouldn't be part of our diet. And that doesn't mean you can't have an occasional ice cream or an occasional sweet or an occasional piece of bread. It's just the majority of your diet should be very low in starch and sugar. And that will fix the insulin problem. You'll lose weight, you'll feel better. The whole idea of calories in, calories out, weight loss, just totally debunked. And there's just incredible papers on this now, the carbohydrate insulin hypothesis by Bloodwig, this great number of great scientists who were sharing this. In fact, the data came out over the last 20 years. This recently was published. It showed that we've been exercising more and eating less and gaining more weight. How is that possible? Well, it's because it's not all about calories. It's about the quality of the calories. And the quality of the calories we're eating is diminished, and the high starch and sugar is a big part of that.
Well, Mark, that's nearly the end of what we were hoping to cover with you. But as you're looking now towards the future of Lifeforce and your role as a sort of clinical and scientific advisor for us, what are you hoping for from Lifeforce? What are you excited about for the company in the future?
I think I've always wanted to support companies that are bringing functional medicine framework to people in an easily accessible, digestible way that's cost effective, that can change their lives. And I'm just one person. I can only do so many things. I can only see so many patients. But to have a platform that's digital, that can scale, that can give people solutions based on these ideas that are self-actionable, that makes me excited. So I think that's really what I feel committed to.
Awesome. Well, we really appreciate the support that you've given us so far. We feel very fortunate to have someone like you helping to build the model and just as a general thought partner for us. So thank you for that. Thank you for the time this morning. I feel like we all learn a lot whenever we have a conversation with you. So this has been great.